Hello, my name is Daryl Caswell, and I am the founder of Landwell Reed Knives, and I manufacture reed knives for oboe players, bassoon players, sax players, just anybody who needs a reed knife. I'm the guy who makes it for them. And what I'm going to do today is talk a bit about how that might apply to help clarinet players who want to get into working on their own reeds. Okay, so what I want to do is take this opportunity to provide clarinet players just a little fundamental knowledge about using a knife, a reed knife, if you're going to start trying to work on your reeds, which I think is a great idea. As they say about adjusting and making reeds, there's only three things you need to have: a sharp knife, a sharp knife, a sharp knife, which tells you just how important that is. But when I see people trying, especially novices, trying to use their knife, I see all kinds of things that they basically screw themselves up right from the get-go. One of the first things is, what kind of stone are you going to use? For instance, I've got three here. This is a diamond stone, and everybody thinks, oh man, that must be fantastic. Yes, it is fantastic. It'll tear the hell right off your edge. And so you only ever want to use a diamond stone when you're trying to restore a knife that's been damaged. And this is a water stone, which is a fantastic thing because what the water stone does is creates a little slurry of like grinding paste almost, so that when you're using it to sharpen, it's constantly renewing the slurry that is doing the very fine sharpening. But of course, it requires that you've got water on it and it's soaked in water. Sitting around in your chair in orchestra, maybe not the best thing you want to do. So what most people do is use this, which is a India oil stone, it's called. And right away, the first misconception that people have is, well, I better oil this stone all the time because it says it's an oil stone. That's not what it's about. It's called an oil stone because there's oil in it. If you leave it sit in the back of your car window on a hot day, you'll find out that there's oil in here. And you'll notice this red here was this color when it was new. I never ever clean this stone. And the reason I never clean this stone is because the little particles of steel which get into the around the grains of the stone create something very similar to this little slurry here, and you get a perfect balance between polishing your edge and sharpening the edge. And this is something that a lot of people don't get. And you also notice that this stone, I probably sharpened thousands of knives on this stone, and it's still perfectly flat because I use this only for the very last part of the sharpening of a knife. If I'm doing anything heavy duty, I'm going to go over to here. If I'm doing something that is I'm doing over and over and over again at a bench, I'm going to go to this. But if I'm sitting there doing it on my lap, just about everything I do with a knife that's already pretty much ready to go, I just have to touch it up. I'm always going to go to this. And now when you use this kind of stone, the thing I see, any of these stones, you'll notice that, the knife is wider than the stone. And you want to have it like that in order to control it. But I'll see people getting on here and they're going to sharpen their blade, and I won't put the blade on the stone because I don't want to wreck it, but they'll start going like this. Because you see people doing that on TV. Well, if you take a look, slow that down in slow motion, when is this edge or this edge ever touching the stone? It never is. So when I see knives coming back to me to be reconditioned, most of the time I see that it's been completely worn out like this. There's a big dip in the center and nothing has happened at the edges. Or people will say, well, I only ever use the edge, so they'll sharpen like this. And of course they'll wear this down, and then you'll get it, big slice coming off of here. It's really important in a knife to keep that edge as it looks when it's new. When a knife is 5 years old, it should look just the same. And the way you do that on a bevel, which is what I recommend clarinet players use, is a bevel is excellent because the angle that you need to do the scraping is already there, and it's always there. The problem with a bevel is if you screw up the sharpening once, you wreck the knife. Now, a bevel is called a bevel because of this broad, flat bevel that's on here, and you put that bevel on the stone. And so when you can feel that the bevel is on the stone, now what you do is you got two hands that you're using. You never do it with one hand here, because then you'll put a whole lot of force right here and nothing here, and you'll wreck the knife very quickly. So you put two hands on the knife, you make sure that the blade is completely on the stone, and you only move it in this direction, back and forth on the stone. In fact, I move it, lift it, move it back. And so you always make sure that it's always on the stone, and you always have uniform pressure on the blade. No, I'm not even touching the handle when I do this, because the handle is just a lever. And the reason that you want to do this is you want to remove what are called all the degrees of freedom when you're sharpening a knife. And the degree of freedom means if we take the knife like this, it can move this way, 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 and it can move this way. So you've got basically 6 ways that this knife will move. And if you're just trying to sharpen your knife like this, your hand, your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, they all have those numbers of degrees of freedom. And so here you're completely out of control, and you'll ruin a knife within moments if you try and sharpen it like that. You want to have everything set in a place where nothing moves, and the only motion that happens is in one direction only, and that is this. So now you've got equal force on the stone, and you only move it in one direction, and the whole blade stays on the stone all the time, and you're going to be able to keep your knife working far longer than if you don't do that. In fact, my worst customers, they'll buy a knife like this and I won't see them for 10 years. But a lot of other people, they'll buy a knife like this and I'll see them about a month later, because they've screwed it all up because of the fact that they're trying to do this kind of stuff. So it's probably the most important aspect of understanding. Use the right stone for the right part of the life of the knife. Only use this when you're trying to restore it from completely dull back to sharp. Use this if you can afford to be using in a place where you can use water. But for the most part, use a fine India oil stone. Never clean it, and always be sure that that the whole knife is on there. You're only moving in one direction, and you got equal force on all parts of the knife, and it'll last forever.